There's a moment in every empire's decline when the Allies stop answering the phone. Not with a declaration, not with a dramatic break. They just start hedging, taking meetings with your rivals, signing deals you're not part of. And by the time you realize what's happening, the alliance that took decades to build has quietly dissolved. It happened to Rome, it happened to Britain, it happened to the Soviet Union. And right now, in 2025, it's happening to the United States through NATO. The pattern is always the same. Stage 1, the empire builds alliances through strength and benefits. Stage 2, the empire overextends and demands more than it gives. Stage 3, allies start looking for alternatives. Stage 4, the empire tries to hold the alliance together through threats and bribes, but it's too late. The credibility is gone. In Stage 5, the allies formally abandon ship, and the empire loses its strategic depth overnight. We're watching Stage 3 turn into Stage 4 right now, and most Americans have no idea it's happening. This isn't theory. This is history repeating with perfect precision. Let me show you how it happened 3 times before, exactly the same way, and why NATO is following the exact same script. Rome, 200 AD to 476 AD, the first alliance collapse. At its peak, Rome didn't conquer everyone. They didn't have to. They built a network of allied tribes and kingdoms called Foederati. These weren't Roman citizens. They were independent peoples who signed treaties with Rome. They provided troops for Roman wars. They defended Roman borders. And in exchange, Rome gave them money, protection, and access to Roman markets. It was the perfect system. Rome got security without the cost of permanent occupation. The Foederati got wealth and stability. Everyone benefited. Until they didn't. Stage 1, alliances built on strength. In the 2nd century, being a Roman ally meant something. Roman roads connected your territory to the richest economy on earth. Roman legions protected your borders from enemies. Roman gold paid your soldiers. The deal was clear. You provide troops when Rome calls. Rome provides everything else. Tribes lined up to join. Germanic tribes, Gallic tribes, Eastern European tribes. They all wanted in. Because Roman power was real and Roman benefits were tangible. Stage 2, overextension and exploitation. By the 3rd century, Rome was fighting everywhere. Persians in the east, Germanic tribes in the north, civil wars internally, and they started demanding more from the Foederati. More troops, longer campaigns, higher costs. But the benefits started shrinking. Roman gold was being debased. The coins had less silver, more copper. Roman protection was spreading thin. The legions couldn't be everywhere at once. Roman markets were collapsing. The economy that made the alliance valuable was dying. The Foederati were giving more and getting less. That's when the loyalty started to crack. Stage 3, allies seek alternatives. By the 4th century, the Germanic tribes saw what was happening. Rome was weak, the borders were porous, the payments were worthless, so they started making their own arrangements, trading with Rome's enemies, settling on Roman land without permission, ignoring Roman commands. They weren't declaring war, they were just hedging, keeping their options open, testing how much Rome would tolerate. Stage 4, bribes and threats fail. Rome saw the loyalty fading, so they tried to buy it back. They gave the Foederati land inside Roman territory. They gave them official titles. They gave them command of Roman legions. But it didn't work, because the problem wasn't the deal. The problem was that Rome couldn't enforce anything anymore. The Foederati knew it. When Rome threatened them, they laughed. When Rome bribed them, they took the money and did what they wanted anyway. Stage 5, total abandonment. In 476 AD, a Foederati general named Odoacer just deposed the last Roman emperor, not with a massive invasion, just walked in and took over. Because by that point, the entire Roman military was made up of Foederati troops. The allies had become the empire, and they decided they didn't need Rome anymore. The Western Roman Empire ended, not because of external conquest, but because their own allies stopped pretending to be loyal. The alliance that built the empire became the weapon that killed it. Britain, 1920 to 1960. The Second Alliance collapse. After World War I, Britain ruled the largest empire in history. But they didn't rule it alone. They had the Commonwealth, a network of self-governing dominions and colonies tied to Britain through loyalty, trade, and military cooperation. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, India. These weren't conquered provinces. They were partners. They sent millions of troops to fight in British wars. They bought British goods. They held British pounds. They were the foundation of British global power. Until they weren't. Stage 1, alliances built on mutual benefit. In the 19th century, being part of the British Empire meant access to the world's largest market, the strongest navy, and the most stable currency. If you were Canada, British investment built your railroads. If you were Australia, the Royal Navy protected your trade routes. If you were India, you got access to British education, infrastructure, and administration. The costs were real, but so were the benefits. The Commonwealth worked because Britain delivered value. Stage 2, overextension and exploitation. World War I changed everything. Britain demanded total mobilization from the Commonwealth. Canadian troops died at Vimy Ridge. Australian troops died at Gallipoli. Indian troops died in Mesopotamia. 1 million Commonwealth soldiers killed fighting Britain's war. And when the war ended, the Dominions asked, what did we get? Britain was bankrupt. The pound was shaky. British markets were closed to protect British producers. The empire that used to give was now just taking. And the Commonwealth noticed. Stage 3, Allies seek alternatives. In the 1920s and 30s, the Dominions started acting independently. Canada signed trade deals with the United States without asking London. Australia started building relationships with Japan. South Africa started looking inward. India started demanding independence. They weren't leaving yet. But they were preparing for a world without British dominance. They saw the debt. They saw the weakness. They saw Britain losing ground to America, and they hedged. Stage 4, bribes and threats fail. After World War II, Britain was desperate to hold the Commonwealth together. They created the modern Commonwealth structure in 1949, giving members independence, but keeping them tied to Britain culturally and economically. They tried to maintain the pound-sterling zone, making Commonwealth countries hold reserves in pounds. But it didn't work, because Britain couldn't offer what they used to. The Royal Navy was a shadow of itself. British markets were too small. The pound kept getting devalued. America was the new power, and everyone knew it. Stage 5, total abandonment. Between 1947 and 1970, the Commonwealth effectively dissolved as a strategic alliance. India left in 1947 and immediately aligned with the Soviets and non-aligned movement. African colonies became independent and joined the UN. Canada and Australia formalized their military relationships with the United States, not Britain. By 1970, the Commonwealth was a social club. Britain kept a symbolic role, but the strategic depth was gone. The allies that made Britain a superpower had quietly moved on. Soviet Union, 1950 to 1991. The Third Alliance collapse. After World War II, the USSR built the Warsaw Pact, a military alliance of Eastern European states bound to Moscow. Poland, East Germany, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria. These weren't willing partners. They were occupied territories. But over time, the Soviets tried to turn occupation into alliance. They built economic integration through Comecon. They trained Eastern European officers in Moscow. They created a myth of socialist brotherhood. For 40 years, it looked solid. Then it collapsed in less than 1 year. Stage 1, alliances built on force. The Warsaw Pact wasn't built on mutual benefit. It was built on Soviet tanks. But the Soviets tried to make it work economically. They gave Eastern Europe subsidized oil and gas. They built factories and infrastructure. They created a closed trading system where Eastern European goods had guaranteed markets. It was coercive, but it had benefits. If you were East Germany, you got cheap energy. If you were Poland, you got industrial development. The system worked as long as Soviet power was unquestioned. Stage 2, overextension and failing benefits. By the 1970s, the Soviet economy was stagnating. They were spending 20% of GDP on the military. They were in Afghanistan. They were propping up Cuba, Vietnam, Syria, Angola. And the subsidies to Eastern Europe were becoming unsustainable. Oil prices dropped in the 1980s. Soviet revenue collapsed. The benefits that made the Warsaw Pact tolerable started disappearing. Polish factories got less Soviet oil. East German workers saw their living standards fall behind West Germany. The costs were still there. The benefits weren't. Stage 3, Allies seek alternatives. In the 1980s, Eastern European countries started quietly looking west. Poland's Solidarity movement was talking to Western unions. Hungary started economic reforms that looked capitalist. Czechoslovakia's intellectuals were reading Western philosophy. They weren't rebelling yet, but they were preparing. They saw Gorbachev's reforms. They saw the Soviet Union weakening, and they hedged. Stage 4, bribes and threats fail. Gorbachev tried to reform the alliance. He announced in 1988 that the Soviet Union wouldn't use force to keep Eastern Europe in line anymore. He thought giving them freedom would make them stay voluntarily. He was catastrophically wrong, because the only thing holding the Warsaw Pact together was the threat of Soviet tanks. Once that was gone, there was no reason to stay. Stage 5, total abandonment. In 1989, the whole thing collapsed. Poland elected a non-communist government in June. Hungary opened its border with Austria in September. The Berlin Wall fell in November. By 1990, every single Warsaw Pact member had abandoned the alliance. The USSR tried to hold it together with promises and reforms, but it was over. The allies that gave the Soviet Union strategic depth in Europe vanished in 9 months. 2 years later, the Soviet Union itself ceased to exist. The United States and NATO, 1949 to 2025. The Fourth Alliance collapse happening now. NATO was created in 1949 as a defensive alliance against the Soviet Union. For 70 years, it's been the foundation of American power in Europe. 32 member nations, collective defense, American troops stationed across the continent. It looked unbreakable. But if you know the pattern, you can see it's following the exact same sequence. And we're in the late stages. Stage 1, alliances built on strength. After World War II, being a NATO member meant something. American money rebuilt your economy through the Marshall Plan. American nuclear weapons protected you from the Soviets. American markets bought your goods. The deal was clear. You host American bases. You align with American foreign policy. America provides security and prosperity. It worked for 50 years because America delivered. Stage 2, overextension and exploitation. After the Cold War ended, NATO should have dissolved. Its purpose was gone. Instead, America expanded it. We added Eastern Europe. We fought wars in Afghanistan, Libya, beyond the North Atlantic. And we started demanding more from allies. Higher defense spending, support for American wars in the Middle East, sanctions on Russia that hurt European economies more than ours. The benefits started shrinking. American markets aren't what they used to be. The European economy is bigger than ours now. American protection from who? Russia can barely handle Ukraine. The costs are still there. The benefits aren't obvious anymore. Stage 3, allies seek alternatives. Right now, European leaders are openly talking about strategic autonomy. France has been leading this push for years. Germany is building its own defense capabilities. They're increasing trade with China despite American objections. They've been slow-walking American sanctions on Russia because they need the energy. They're not leaving NATO, but they're hedging. They're preparing for a world where American security guarantees aren't reliable. They saw Afghanistan in 2021. They've watched American political chaos, and they're quietly building alternatives. Stage 4, bribes and threats fail. With Trump back in the White House in 2025, the cracks are becoming visible. During his first term, Trump openly questioned NATO's value and threatened to withdraw if allies didn't pay more. Now he's president again, and European leaders remember those threats. They're taking him seriously this time. The United States is still pressuring allies to increase defense spending to 2% of GDP. We're deploying troops to Eastern Europe. We're giving them intelligence and weapons. But here's the problem. The leverage is gone. Europe doesn't fear Russia the way they used to. Germany faced energy crises because of the Ukraine war. France openly questions American leadership. Turkey, a NATO member, has bought Russian weapons and plays both sides. Hungary blocks EU decisions and maintains close ties with Russia. We can threaten, we can bribe, but we can't deliver what we used to, and they know it. Stage 5 is coming. We're not there yet, but the acceleration is visible. With Trump's known skepticism of NATO and his transactional approach to alliances, European countries are preparing for American unreliability. If Trump follows through on reducing commitments to Ukraine, it sends a message to every NATO ally. If he tries to negotiate directly with Putin over European security without consulting allies, it breaks trust. If the dollar continues losing ground and we can't afford our military commitments, it accelerates everything. When stage 5 comes, it won't be dramatic. It'll be quiet. NATO will still exist on paper. But European countries will make their own security arrangements. They'll accommodate Russia on energy. They'll trade freely with China. They'll build their own military capacity. And America will wake up one day and realize our most important alliance has dissolved while we weren't paying attention. 3 times this happened before. Rome's Foederati became their own power and ended the empire. Britain's Commonwealth quietly aligned with America and left Britain isolated. The Soviet Union's Warsaw Pact vanished in months once the threat of force was gone. Every time the dying empire believed their allies were loyal. Every time they were wrong. Every time the allies were just waiting for the right moment to leave. And every time the empire collapsed shortly after. The pattern says NATO is next. Maybe it takes 5 years, maybe 10. But the sequence is locked in. We're overextended. We're demanding more than we give. Our allies are hedging. And with Trump's unpredictable approach to alliances, the timeline might be shorter than anyone thinks. When allies finally leave, we'll lose our strategic position in Europe overnight. Just like Rome, just like Britain, just like the USSR. The alliance that made us a superpower will become the proof that we're not anymore. The pattern doesn't lie. And history says we're next.